I started putting up 1 or 2 of these photos every single day on Facebook. And you know what I noticed that was the most liberating thing in the world? 1 or 2 names that I didn't recognize, you know? They weren't my friends, they weren't my family, they weren't anybody that had some sort of social connection to me following my page. I brought a PowerPoint with me. It's what I call a 75 PowerPoint. It's one of those PowerPoints that you make right before class, when it's due. But what it does is it kind of demonstrates the evolution and the history of humans of New York. So I like to bring it along. We'll see if it comes up okay. One thing that I often ask people is, it's a common question you guys might see, is if you could give, one piece of advice to a large group of people, what would that advice be? And, my answer is always, don't wait for perfect, which is, don't wait for an idea to be perfectly formed in your head before you go out and do something. Because there's so many people, in this city especially, so many musicians and artists or business people that are, sitting around and they're planning and they're waiting and they're thinking about the perfect idea. And they said, oh, I just got to, practice in my room a little bit more before I, take that first step. Or I've got to, just plan a little bit more, chart a little bit more. And what you kind of find is that moment never comes when it's perfect to start. So I always say, don't wait for perfect. And I think Humans of New York was a good example of that, because Humans of New York wasn't a fully formed idea that I had in my head and then I executed. The Humans of New York that exists today and is successful today looks nothing like the Humans of New York that I set out to do. It was the result of hundreds of tiny evolutions that really just came out of a love of photography. And that's just where it started. It just started with a love of photography. And I got my camera back when I was in Chicago and I was working in finance. Little did I know my time working in finance was very limited. I didn't know that at the time. But I just kind of got a camera as a way to relieve stress on the weekends. And I would go downtown Chicago and I would just photograph everything. I wasn't even taking pictures of people at that time. I was photographing anything I could. And here's, one of the first photos that I took. And I mean, even then I was taking 1,000 photos a day. This is some snow splattered on some ice. I probably photographed this for 20 different angles just to get this photo, excuse me. Here, I was going some sort of metaphor between the sticks and the dinosaur back there. I don't know, this is the beginning of HONY right here, dinosaur bones. This one, and this is actually a kind of funny story because because remember, I lost my job about 3 weeks after I started photographing, but I love photography, and so I knew I wanted to be a photographer. And so I traveled around a little while, and I just kind of took a trip around the country and taking some photos in different places, sleeping on friends' couches. And then I knew that I wanted to come to New York because I kind of started thinking of the ideas of Humans in New York, but I didn't have any money. And so what I did is I took all these photos that I'm showing you now that I took in my first 3 weeks, and I called all my rich trader friends who were still working and doing well, and I made them buy them. And so this one is known in my mind as the one I forced on my friend Andy. Yeah, but it's kind of nice, right? I wouldn't look bad over a couch. I mean, that was not bad either. Ooh. Yeah. These will be available after the show. Okay. So this is a little different beforehand. Normally when I give this PowerPoint presentation, I've got the computer screen, and I can see the next slide that's coming, so there's kind of an intro. There's probably going to be some jagged transitions like that. So anyway. So I say that Humans of New York, started from a love of photography. The base of it was just kind of that feeling every day of going out and getting a shot like that and just being so energized and just loving that feeling. And so when I lost my job, I said, I enjoy this so much. I spent the last 3 years, I was a bond trader, so I was literally trading money to make money. My life was basically, it was fun, but it was all thinking about money. So I said, I'm going to take a few months out, and I'm going to do something just because I enjoy it. And I'd only been doing this for 3 weeks, but I knew every time I got a really cool photo like that, it was just a great feeling. It was kind of like a treasure hunt. So I said, this is what I enjoy. And so I'm going to take some time, and I'm going to travel around. I'm just going to do this for fun. And as I started doing that, I kind of started gravitating towards pictures of people. And at first, it was just, and this is an example of these hundreds of tiny evolutions that landed on where Humans of New York is today, and hopefully it's still evolving. At first, it was just kind of candid shots of people like this, because I didn't think that you could actually approach somebody and get them to let you take their photo. That seemed very weird to me. And so I did that for a while. And then this was the first photo, and you can see it's not exactly a portrait, but it kind of took enough courage to get the photo almost to be a portrait, where there's no way. I was sitting on the subway, and there was no way to really kind of hide from these people. So this to me is kind of the birth of my first real portrait, or my first people photo. And I just remember it was in Chicago, and I was sitting on the subway. And what I love so much about this is that those kids don't know each other at all. Like, these aren't friends. These are just two different mothers and children. And I just love how they're just making the exact same expression on their face. And one thing that I think is funny is that now, if this was the beginning of Humans of New York, the first portrait, some of the photos recently that I post, some of them will have tens of thousands of comments, hundreds of thousands of likes. The very first photo of HONY had one comment from a member of my Quiz Bowl team, and it says, "Racial harmony, I like it." Oh, look, I broke this. All right, they said if you break something, just put a smile on, and then we'll fix it. Oh, ooh, yeah. Back to him, yeah, okay. So, yeah, racial harmony, I like it. And then I just kind of started taking some more photos like this, and this one's the only this one was in Chicago. The only comment's from my mother. It says, "The Windy City." the Windy City. Thanks, Mom. Yeah, humble beginnings, humble beginnings. And so, yeah, these are like kind of some of the first shots I was taking. Like, if you look at real early Humans of New York stuff, it's kind of a different type of photography. There's a lot more candid shots. And like what I used to do is, again, I was still like unconvinced that if you actually approached a person and asked for their photograph, they would say yes, and that seemed weird to me. But I would see so many photos that I'd want, and I just would be so afraid that they'd say no, that I would just kind of like drop down in front of them and hold the camera there and wait till they looked up and then snap it. And because so it was kind of a portrait. Well, that's a different one. Hold on, let me see. Well, this is more what I'm talking about right here. Actually, my friend and I were drinking one night, and we actually photoshopped those heads on each other. 'Cause they are the exact same faces. So, and then there's another one. Yeah, these are like photos, before. You don't really see these on HONY, because these are like before I was really asking people. That guy was not happy. But then, what I learned is that, like, 9 out of 10 times when I did that, I'd get away with it. I'd kind of get away, and nothing bad would happen. But then 1 out of 10 times, somebody would catch you taking their photo, and it's understandable. And they don't know why you're taking it. They get extremely mad. They'd scream at you. And I just kind of learned that, it's like, it's easier. It's actually less stressful just to make these approaches all the time and just to ask people. And so, no idea what's next. Oh, cool. So this is what Humans of New York first looked like when I decided to move to New York. So I'd been traveling around, and I started kind of gravitating towards these pictures of people. And the idea that brought me to New York, again, it's not I moved to New York with 2 bags and no money, and just kind of cut everything from behind me and said, this is what I'm going to do with my life. And it wasn't to do Humans of New York as it currently is, which is a blog of stories of strangers from the street. The exact idea was that I was going to create a photographic census of the city. That's why I moved to New York. I was going to take 10,000 portraits of people, and I was going to plot them kind of on a map of the city. So you can click on any neighborhood in New York and kind of scroll through the faces of the people who lived there. Still, it's a good idea. A lot of work, though. And so that's what I did my first few months in New York. I would just go out all day long. I wasn't talking to people yet. I didn't have captions yet. And I would just take these portraits all day long. And you can't see it. I got this out of like some internet archive, so some of the images are broken. But you can see at the top, at the very, very top, there's a counter there. So I was like actually counting up to 10,000. And so like my original goal was to it's so stupid. I was gonna work in anonymity and poverty and just squalor for 3 years while I got 10,000 photos and then like try to contact newspapers and let them know about it. That was kind of my goal. Oh man, that was sad. That was a difficult time because I didn't know anything about blogging. I didn't know, what I've learned now is that blogging and kind of being a content producer on the internet is contingent on giving a group of people a stream of content that they can rely on. I always say that, one thing that I would like HONY to be is, a morning cup of coffee or something. Just I always want to work hard enough that, somebody who follows the blog can rely on the content and rely on the fact that there's going to be something there. I didn't know that at the time. I was just accumulating content, as opposed to just producing 1 or 2 a day. And then we'll go back here for a sec. So the real big evolution, and this is so liberating to me. Like I actually have, cried talking to Facebook employees because, Facebook has played such a large role in my life. It was the first. Now we're on Tumblr, and now we're on Instagram. But so Facebook is basically what transitioned me into just accumulating all these portraits, working all day long with really nothing to show for it, no real way to know if I was progressing. It was a very, very lonely time, those first 6 months in New York, because all I had was like this idea, nothing to show for it, nothing to show my family or friends that what I was doing was anything else than just avoiding getting a job. And I kind of like believed I had this idea, but there was just like no forward progress, no money. I was borrowing money to pay the rent, and it was just like, it was a very lonely and difficult time. And somebody talked me into making a Facebook page one time. I was like, okay, well, I'll try that. I've tried everything else. And so I kind of started putting up 1 or 2 of these photos every single day. And I started putting up 1 or 2 of these photos every single day on Facebook. And you know what I noticed that was the most like liberating thing in the world? 1 or 2 names that I didn't recognize, They like weren't my friends, they weren't my family, they weren't anybody that had some sort of like social connection to me following my page. Just like 1 or 2 a day. And like that was one of the happiest moments of my life because it was the first time that I'm in New York kind of chasing this like crazy idea. The very first time I saw a correlation between the work I was putting in and growth. It's the first time that I saw a path. And I remember once it got up, because then it got up to 2 or 3 new people a day, 4 new people a day. And I remember when it got up to the point where I was putting on 10 fans every day. Now it's, gosh, we were averaging 30,000 fans a day for a while. But like, I remember when I got to the point where I was putting on 10 fans every day, and I was just like sitting with my friend, and I was just like, in 3 years, it's going to be 10,000 people looking at this stuff. And like, I remember feeling like I was the guy on the Titanic, like I was on top of the world. Like to me, that was like such success, and just like that feeling that it's just every time all I have to do, and what it did is it took all these circumstances and things that seemed out of my control, and then kind of put them in my hand, and it said, you know what? All you have to do is work. You go out there every single day and you take these photos, you talk to these people, you learn these stories, and all you have to do is that every single day, and you're going to get 10 new people. And then suddenly, it kind of gave me a feeling of control over my own destiny. And so I've been, like, once I kind of identified that kind of source of control, I kind of became, hyper obsessive with it. It's just like, you can ask my girlfriend, it's just like, if I don't get my photos every day, I'm stressed. Because like that was like, for the first time, like I realized that that's what could move me forward. Just like with social media, if I could just take 5 photos every single day, I could grow and I could support myself and I can do this. And now that even though Humans in New York is very big and like very successful now, that's like the only thing that I see that I can control. I can't control if this book's going to be a bestseller or, that people are going to continue to like it. But it's like the one thing I can control is the one thing that I can control at the beginning, was kind of getting out there and just working every single day and just working harder than anybody else and just going out there and working. And, I always said that no matter how big Humans of New York got, like, that's what I was going to focus on because, that's what can keep me sane. And, that's what got me there, is just kind of focusing on the process and going out there and working every single day. And if you want to be the best author in the world, you can control how many pages you write a day, every single day. If you want to be the best pianist in the world, you can control how long you play every single day. It's the only thing you can control is your work. And so I encourage anyone and everyone that if you want to do something great, focus on that one area of control. And then if it gets huge and it still continues to work, that's the way you're going to stay centered. It's just continuing to focus on that. And so the big evolution that finally happened that Humans of New York is known for today is the stories. It's like for the first year and a half of its existence, it was nothing but a photography blog. And now you can't even call it a photography blog anymore. Really, there's photographs. Photographs are a part of it. But, I think what Humans of New York is known for today is the stories. And this was the moment when that evolution finally happened. I took a photo of this woman, and I didn't really like the photo very much. I mean, I still don't like a lot of my photos. Like I said, I don't think I'm the greatest photographer or anywhere near it. And that was just a photo I especially didn't like. So even though she was really cool, I decided I wasn't going to use it. And I kind of sat on it for a couple days, and then I got sick, and I couldn't go out and work. And I knew that I had this photo of this woman. It's like, well, God, I feel horrible, and I have nothing to post on the blog. I took that picture of that woman in the green a few days ago. I don't really like the photos, but I remember she said something to me. She said, I used to be a different color every single day, but one day I was green, and that was a great day. And so I've been green for 15 years. And I was like, you know what? Like, that is, I'm just going to put that on the photo and see what happens. And I put it up, and it was the most popular thing I've ever posted. And after a year and a half of posting several times a day, I said, wow, there's something here. There's something here. It was kind of the same feeling I had when I took my first people photo. Or, the first time I stopped somebody and got a portrait. When I posted that, it's like, oh, here's something different. Like, this is something different. I discovered something that I was doing that was kind of a little bit different. And so ever since that moment, my focus and kind of the path of Humans of New York has been, and this is still how I define it, Humans of New York is finding a way to create the most intimate moments and get the most intimate stories out of complete strangers. If there's one thing that's Humans of New York, like what's Humans of New York? Is like the photography especially that good? I like it, but I don't think it's that exceptional. It's like the journalism, do I ask like the right questions? It's like, no, I mean, maybe, but there's so many better journalists. But so this thing put on 6 million Facebook fans, in the past 6 months or 7 months. And to me, it's like, if there's one thing that Humans of New York is, and if there's one thing that maybe I've learned to do better than anybody else in the world through doing it tens of thousands of times, is stopping a random person in the street and in a very small amount of time, making that person feel comfortable enough and creating a comfortable enough environment to get some very genuine, honest, unstaged managed moments and quotes out of them. And I think that's what Humans of New York's become. And that's what I focus the most on improving and maintaining is that intimacy out of anonymity, the intimacy out of strangeness. And that kind of circle is what I try to maintain. And I'm going to demonstrate, if I could get a volunteer from the audience. All right, first hand. So I have to say that we are filming this, and so they said anybody on the stage needs a release. So you think your mom's okay with it? They said make sure the parent would be okay with it. Okay, come on up. Yeah. Hey. What's your name?
Emma.
Emma, it's nice to meet you. Need help? No. She's, oh, got it. Okay. So, yeah, this is on. So this belongs to you.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll probably just kind of sit on the edge of the stage here. Why don't you sit right here? Just go ahead and sit down, and I'll join you in a second. Emma, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So everybody give Emma a hand. You're fine. You're off the hook for a couple minutes here. I'll join you in a second. So I always have to preface it so much when I invite somebody up on stage, because this is the exact opposite of an environment that I seek to create on the street. You know, it's like, it's what I look for when I approach somebody. Like, really, if you look at kind of early humans of New York, it's very visual, it's very colorful, it's very eccentric, very outsized personalities. Where if you kind of go down through the timeline, you'll notice that the people may become, I mean, there's still some very colorful people on there, but it becomes more kind of normal people and more, normal distribution, not too colorful, not too bright, but the stories kind of become a lot longer. And, that's become a change in my process ever since I kind of started embracing the stories, is that whereas I used to kind of look for visual cues when I was walking down the street, now I just kind of look for somebody that I can talk to. And often that's somebody that's kind of sitting alone. I don't like to, and here's the irony of this whole situation, is like, I don't like to interview people in front of anybody else. I'll find that even, and this is really interesting, it's interesting psychologically, is that even if somebody is with their best friend, okay, someone they trust in the world, and they're fully aware that millions of people are going to read what they say that night, if they're best friends with them, they'll clam up. Isn't that interesting? Like, even if they know that 10 million people are going to see it that night, if they're best friends next to them, they'll clam up. And so, yeah, so I basically say this, that we need to absolutely take all the pressure off Emma to say anything profound, because this is not going to be about Emma's answers at all. This is just going to be so that I can demonstrate and explain my process, because obviously anybody that's being interviewed in this situation, it would be very hard to speak off the cuff and be authentic. So my first rule, this is the only rule I follow like every single time, is that you never approach somebody from behind. And I've got to say, like, as I'm describing this stuff, I don't want it to seem like kind of like psychological trickery or anything, like, oh, I studied like human psychology and learned the best way to do this, because that wasn't it at all. I just got rejected and beat down so many times, all right, that just in an effort to avoid pain, I kind of developed this process. Like, okay, this is the way to just get rejected the least and just make people feel the most comfortable. So that's kind of how all these things learned. And the one thing that I always follow is that I never approach people from behind. So if, say, Emma was facing that way, let's say she was kind of even walking down the street, instead of walking up to her from behind, I would kind of do one of these, and, I'd kind of try to get in front of her and then come back around. And so then when I make the approach, I always laugh because, my voice is naturally kind of high. And it kind of makes me wince sometimes when I'm seeing it on like news interviews, like, God, I sound like a girl. But Owen Wilson is whenever there's an interview, like one of the most upvoted comments is Owen Wilson voice. I'm just like, oh God. So my voice is naturally already kind of high. But when I make an approach, it goes 2 octaves higher. And I kind of like crouch down. It's all in an effort just to make somebody feel as most comfortable as possible. And in New York, with people constantly coming up with you, asking for money, asking for things all the time, you have a very short amount of time to just make the person feel comfortable. And we're constantly, when somebody's walking up to us, I do the same thing. It's just like, oh, what does he want? Is this person a threat to me? And so it's like getting past that defense mechanism, especially in New York. I've been to 12 different countries. I've worked with 20 different translators. I don't get rejected anywhere more than I do in New York City. We've got a lot of defense mechanisms. So what I normally do is I kind of, excuse me. Is there any way I can take your photograph?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And so Emma was very agreeable. And you'll notice I didn't even kind of describe the blog, and I think some of that's kind of a tribute to those early days when I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor and didn't have any money, and I didn't have a blog to show people, really. And, I kind of had to develop this process without having any kind of validation to show people, and so I would just ask people for their photo. So it's still kind of a part of my process. And Emma was very agreeable. But normally, that's when I kind of watch the face, because you can kind of feel the no coming, and it's just like, if you feel the no coming, then I pull out my phone, and I said, okay, well, I run a blog called Humans of New York, If they still say no, that's fine. But if they say yes, I say, okay, great. And notice I haven't talked about the interview yet. And, that's kind of all the process of escalating intimacy. You just don't want to scare people away. I certainly don't want to go up to somebody and say, can I take your photo and ask you about your dead relatives or anything like that. So I just, I always ask for the photo first, and here's a little piece of information. If you ever see a full body shot on the blog, that is the first photo I took, because the first one I always do is a full body shot. And then I sit down. Okay, this is the hard part, and we're going to get through it here. So I sit down. And it's going to be awkward. A lot of people out there. So I say, what I do is I photographed over 5,000 people around New York City, and I find out a little bit about everybody I photograph. And, I might photograph you while you're talking and while you're thinking. And so, like I said, tons of people out there. Don't worry if you can't think of an answer. Answers are very hard. A lot of people can't think of them. Sometimes people can't think of any of the answers. So if there's any answer that's too hard, don't worry about it. And we'll do the best we can. So one question that I often start out with is, what is your greatest struggle right now?
Well, probably school. Which is not that bad considering what I was doing this summer.
What were you doing this summer?
I was in the wilderness in southern Utah for 74 days, and I didn't go inside at all, so it was very outdoors. It was a camp my parents wanted me to go to grow as a person, so. So we would, there weren't any restrooms or anything, so we would dig holes and stuff. And
did that make you grow?
Yeah, a lot.
In what way did your parents think you should grow?
Well, because they often talk about how growing up in New York City, I'm not exposed to a lot of things, just to meet new people and kind of learn what it's not to live in such a privileged place.
What's something that you think your parents don't understand about you?
Probably my sense of humor.
Who would you say has influenced you the most in your life?
An experience or?
No, not an experience, just a person.
A person.
Who would you say you've modeled yourself the most after?
Probably my dad.
What would you say is the part of your dad's personality that you most admire?
I think he's really kind.
Can you tell me a story of a time that your father really demonstrated that kindness, or kind of an example that you think really kind of demonstrates his heart?
I can't really think of a specific moment, but when I often he can tell I'm having a bad day, and he'll come up to me and ask me how I'm feeling or what's wrong, and I don't know, he'll just go out of his way to be really kind and nice and understanding.
And I'm gonna stop it right there, but I'm gonna because then what I would do then is I would say, well, tell me about the worst day that you've had. And so I want to stop there because there's no real need. I think that the process has been demonstrated enough that there's no real need to get the disclosure, because I've got enough to where I can kind of explain what I was doing there. You guys notice, I always compare the interview process to kind of a helicopter. That's, taking very, very wide circles at first, and then kind of, getting into tighter and tighter and tighter circles. Because, whenever I'm talking to somebody, what I'm looking for is something that they can tell me that nobody else has told me out of the 10,000 people that I've talked to on the street, something that I can learn from them that I haven't heard from anyone else. And that's never a philosophy. That's very rarely an opinion. It's almost always a story. It's almost always a story. And so, my goal is to, with these kind of questions, the first are prompts, I'm always kind of looking for a specific story. And, so a lot of times, I know that we're close to a story when we get to a person, who's influenced you most, your father. And what's your favorite thing about your father? His kind heart. And then you can say, well, give me an example of a time when he really kind of demonstrated that kind heart, when I had a bad day. Tell me about the worst day you've ever had. No, kind heart, bad day, these are very general statements. And we kind of protect ourselves with these very general statements. And so, when I'm kind of doing an interview, I'm always trying to find out what the story is. What the story is that kind of lies below these very general statements. What's your greatest struggle right now? I'm trying to be more optimistic. What's the thing that most stands in the way between you and your optimism? My mom's cancer. There's always stories and always these things below our thoughts and our opinions. And our stories are our own. Nobody else shares our stories. Everybody has bad days. Nobody has Emma's bad day. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of always what I'm looking for. And you guys will notice, and they might seem stagnant, but you'll notice a lot of times I ask the happiest moment, saddest moment, time you felt most afraid, the time you felt angriest, and they kind of just seem like stock questions. But what I found is that the stories in our lives that kind of most informed who we are tend to revolve around a very strong emotion. And I kind of have this theory of memory that our mind knows what to remember based on the emotion we were feeling at that time and how strong the emotion was. Because if you think back to your first memory or your strongest memories, a lot of time there's a very strong emotion attached to that. I remember my first memory was some robot scared the hell out of me on Halloween when I was at my grandma's house. I was too young to even go out and trick or treat. He came to our door. Couldn't even get away from him. And so, a lot of times I'll ask those questions. What are the happiest moments of your life? What was the saddest moments of your life? Always, always just trying to get to a story that is that person's and nobody else's. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it works, and you did so good, and thank you so much for helping. Yeah. Awesome. What time is it? What time is it? 10 after 6. Okay, we're doing good. So we got, I lost my clicker. Yeah. So, real quick, this is kind of the story. That's kind of when I started asking questions, and this was the happiest moment of my life. But all right, I'll give the spiel I give at colleges real quick because I just believe it so strongly. As it's hard to say this without sounding egotistical, but I think the Humans of New York story in itself is just an absolutely unbelievable story for no other reason than the fact that I just told you guys about the very first picture I ever took. And now we're on a slide that's a #1 New York Times bestseller. And the distance between those two slides were about 3 years. 3 years from never taking a photograph before to having a #1 New York Times bestselling book of photography. And I think it's a very modern story. I think it's a story that kind of represents the infrastructure in the world and how forgiving the world is of mistakes today. Because there's so much power in the hand, thank you. There's so much power in the hand of individuals now to communicate and to kind of get your word out there and to change directions, that if that can be accomplished in 3 years, because even 10 years ago, Humans of New York wasn't possible. Because if a guy like me wanted to get a #1 New York Times bestselling book, I would have had to get the attention of some people who had influence and clout, gatekeepers, whether that be a magazine editor or an art gallery owner, somebody to say that my photography was good and then it deserved to be beamed out to a lot of people. And that's not even necessary anymore because of social media. We can get our own ideas out there. We can get our own thoughts out there. And so, I think that Humans of New York is kind of really a demonstration of, how much has changed in the past 10 years and how much power and opportunity there is in front of us, no matter how old we are, no matter how many things we've tried. And, I always, the one thing I say, to college students is that it's more important to be different than to be good in kind of this world. And I always use the metaphor of when you log onto your Facebook page and you see this news feed of kind of things coming by. Sally wants you to look at her poem. Jimmy wants you to check out his band page. And there's so many people fighting for our attention at all times. And so I always say that social media has put the power in our hands where any of us can get a big idea out there and any of us can succeed. But because of that, everybody's trying to do it. And so more than ever before, there's just this huge competition for people's attention. And if you guys notice, the path towards Humans of New York is every time I discovered I was doing something a little bit different, that's what I focused on. I was taking pictures of trees and buildings. Then I took a candid picture of a person. And that was a little bit rarer. And so I started taking candid pictures of people. And then I stopped a person, and I took a picture of them. And that little extra element of stopping somebody and taking a portrait was a little bit different. And I realized that was kind of new. And then I focused on that. And then I put that quote by there. And that's when I found that one really big difference that kind of allowed me to take off and stand out on those news feeds and kind of really gather people's attention. So I would just kind of encourage you, for whatever you're doing, whether it be a business or art, or if you find something that you think you're doing that nobody else is doing that's a little bit different, really focus your efforts on that. Really focus your efforts on that. Because in the way that the world is structured right now, and with how many people are competing for attention, that's what you're going to need to kind of get your head out above the crowd. And let's see here. Oh, UN trip. So yeah, I just got back from a 60-day trip, 12 different countries, worked through 20 different translators. It was the same process. I think that's what I really wanted to do, is I really wanted to go to places that have nothing but really bad headlines come out and just do the exact same process that I do anywhere else. Because, my theory is, and I've seen it, that if I am at a protest with 10,000 people and there's 12 other members of the press there, all right, there'll be 10,000 people in the crowd, and one person will be extremely angry and chanting death to America and death to America. All 12 of those photographers will be focused on that one person. They won't be distributed throughout the crowd showing it what it really was. They're looking for the most extreme story. And that's kind of what drives media, is not what's true, what's the best story? What's the best story? So places like Iraq and South Sudan and places with really bad headlines coming out, I wanted to go there and not show what the most extreme was. I didn't want to focus on the person with the machine gun or the person chanting, death to America, or the person that, that adheres to what the greatest, but just like in New York, just kind of take random people as they come and find out their stories. Not in a way to kind of show the optimism or the hopefulness of a place, but just to try to show some normality. And so if I kind of had a goal, while I was traveling, that was it. And like I said, the process was the same. I asked this man his saddest moment, and it happened to be when a B-52 bomber shot a rocket that tore his friend in half. Because some of these places, life is infused by these political events, normal life. So the goal wasn't to kind of hide that or conceal that, but just let it come naturally. Because for everyone, we're running out of time. And this is an image I had on my cover image. And we'll wrap it up with this. I had this in my cover image on Facebook for a while, because I think this is a really good metaphor, for what I'm talking about. And this is Independence Square, Freedom Square in Ukraine, after the protest. And I think it's such a nice image of kind of the two sides of mankind. We have this beautiful side, even in every single person that, kind of creates these wonderful things. And then we kind of have this side, even inside of all of us, that is kind of creating carnage and things like that. And so, I would say that if anything, Humans of New York kind of gets accused of maybe being over-sentimental or kind of rosy viewed, because I kind of do like to kind of focus on this side, But I feel that like so much of the other journalism in the world focuses on this side. And it's not that this is true and this is untrue, or the other way around. It's just all a matter of what you focus on. And so it's just like if you go up and ask people about their happiest moments and their aspirations and things like that, that's not unreal, or that's not an overly rosy picture of the world. It's just, what side of the truth are you trying to focus on? And so, if there's anything that I was trying to do on that trip, and I, try to continue to do, is try to, counter what I think is like the 98% of the mass media that, brings us that all day long. So there's more, but this is a shorter speech, and we do have questions, so I'm going to get to some of these until they kick me off stage. We got Leon Panetta, the director of the CIA, coming in right after that. Yeah, he's coming in like 30 minutes. I do not think there's much overlap in these audiences. Okay, let's see here. I don't know, that's a good question. How many people in this audience have been photographed by me? That's actually kind of something I'm curious about. Anybody? Yay, we got one person down here. Hey, Joy? Yeah. And she is in the book. She is dressed very colorfully. I'll let you guys find her yourself. The caption. Who? Oh, no, I was on a perfect streak here. No, who? Oh, no, where are you? I hear a voice.
With my husband in front of Lincoln Center.
Oh, God, I remember your face. In front of Lincoln Center, you got to tell me the caption. People come up to me, always remember the captions better. Give me.
I had on a blue dress, and you talked to my husband.
What, did he say something? This is before I was doing captions?
He said something really nice.
Aw. You want to tell us what it was? What did he say about you? What was his favorite thing about you?
He said if it hadn't been for me, you wouldn't have known anything about art.
Oh, I do remember that very well. You guys, you were kind of laying down reading the newspaper. Yes. Thank you. Okay, that was cool. Let's see here. Trying to see a question that I... When you were in middle school, what did you want to be when you grew up? I'm a marine biologist. How does it feel to give people the opportunity to share their stories? Also, one of the most fulfilling things about HONY, that in all this kind of effort and all this kind of this strife and effort to build up my own work and to kind of make it self-sustaining and build up an audience, like kind of as a proxy, every person that I talk to kind of also has this audience. It comes through me, and I hope it's not diluted. But yeah, I always, whenever I see somebody that's been photographed by HONY, and I get very serious, and I ask them if it was a good experience, and almost always it's yes, because that really worries me. Imagine this crowd multiplied by a few thousand. That's the people. I meet somebody on the street and they're in front of that many people later that night. So I'm always very, very concerned. I mean, that's what makes HONY work. That, the person that I meet feels comfortable and it's kind of a safe place for them to express themselves. And I'd say that's my biggest fear about HONY, is kind of losing control of the culture. Especially when, I don't know how many of you guys were following from the very beginning, but it was so warm in the beginning. It's just like, and it still is. It's especially, like if you read the top comments, and we have a culture in HONY where if somebody makes fun of somebody, one of the 10 million people or the people they shared it with, that's the abnormal, and then they get corrected, if you'll notice that. There's still people that say nasty things, but the culture is such that they get, I won't say attacked, but they get kind of put down. And it's kind of the reverse in most of the internet. And one of and I don't know how to do it. I can just try, to do what I'm doing or whatever. But one of my biggest worries is that as it grows, losing that culture, so that suddenly being on HONY is no longer a great thing, but it's a painful thing. And that's kind of my biggest fear in relation to HONY, is that somewhere that culture will be lost, and that will happen, and it won't be a gift that I'm giving to people, but some sort of pain I'm inflicting on them. But as of now, like I said, I always ask people, was it a good experience? Yes, so many people contacted me and supported me and told me similar stories, and and that just makes me feel so good. And it's just, it's the thing that the best interviews are the ones where people tell me stuff that they've never told anybody else. Because there's so many people out there that aren't telling anybody else too, And those are the ones that really impact people's lives, because they've been so holding it inside, and to kind of see that somebody out there is going through that exact same thing. So yeah, that makes me feel great. You guys can just, turn the lights on me if Mr. Panetta's trying to get in here. All right. Oh, shit. I'm so glad you said that. I got a kid's book to read. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. The big thing was I was supposed to read the kids' book at the time. The different thing... The different thing about doing kids and doing adults. So I always say that my two favorite groups to photograph are people towards the end of their life and people towards the beginning of their life. Because one of these groups has such a wide breadth of experience behind them through which they're drawing on. And then the other group has just such an innocence of the world that sometimes so much profundity comes out of that innocence. So when I photograph children, I never acknowledge the child until I've talked to the parent. I won't even look at them. So I go straight to the parent, and I ask them, I kind of show them vlog, explain everything, and then you'll be surprised. You think that a lot of times parents are much more willing to throw their kids in front of the camera. I've come across, how do parents let you photograph their kids? A lot of times I'll ask the parent, I'll be like, no, you can photograph them, though, and they'll throw their kids in front. So once I got the parent's permission, I immediately forget the parent, and I drop to the floor, and then it's just kids' world, Then I'm always on the ground. The number one rule to photographing kids, you got to be sitting on your butt or your knees. You just got to be on that level. So I'm always on the floor. My girlfriend always makes me change into different clothes whenever I get home. And so, yeah, I think, one of the coolest parts about HONY has been, and one of the most popular parts has been the kids' pictures, over the years. But one of the things that's kind of an unfortunate paradox about that is that there's some material on there that's kind of so raw that it's not something that a lot of parents kind of feel really comfortable showing to their kids. So with Little Humans, I thought it would be kind of a great opportunity to take one of these kind of most special parts of HONY, which is the kids' book, or which is these kids' photos, and kind of package them up in a way that is accessible to children and can kind of communicate some of the experience and the energy and the diversity of Humans of New York to a really young audience. And so this is the result. Little Humans, I'm going to read it here. All right. So there's the inside flap. Look at those guys. They're just awesome. There's it for Aaron. For Aaron, my co-author, that's a metaphor. And there's our little kid who's leading it here. All right, you guys ready? All right. Little humans can do big things if they stand up tall and hold on tight. Sure, sometimes they fall. But they get back up. They'll be all right. Little humans can be tough. Super tough. Superhero tough. But not too tough to need a hug. or need some friends, or need some love. Little humans can put on a show to make you proud of what they know. They help, they play, they slide in snow. They spill, they learn, and then they grow. Little humans can do such big things and say, I did it myself. But if a thing's a bit too big, they can say, I need some help. With all that little humans do, like bend and twirl and dig, don't be surprised if one says to you, hey, I'm not little, I'm big. And so that is Little Humans. We are so excited about it. Thank you guys so much for coming. This is so great.